Hi everyone, I'm Ian Roth. What you're about to see is my full conversation with Benjamin Portaro. We could only fit about 2 minutes of his story into our show, but we recorded over 20 minutes of his incredible journey. I should warn you, some of the scenes are fairly graphic, but historically speaking, it's important that we capture stories like Benjamin's about a time in history that absolutely cannot be lost. So, with that being said, please enjoy the program.
Well, I want to tell you, I was raised out here in Admore, West Virginia, and it's just a little place. And to me, I wouldn't want to be raised anywhere else. So we didn't have nothing but the woods around us, and me and my cousin we made our own. Back then, things was tough. You didn't have a whole bunch of toys. We made our own, like stilts and pole vaults, and hang a rope up on a tree to swing, and set traps. Back then, there used to be a lot of rabbits. Hunting season, we used to catch rabbits, chase them with our dogs. We had a great time growing up. We didn't have all these things these kids have today, and I'm glad of it. That's right. Yeah, we enjoyed life. We have to say, when my dad came over here, that was during the Great Depression. He had a job, but you know, his first job he had, they were working in a coal mine over here, Lodgeville Road. You had to walk into the pit. He had a hand auger to drill the coal. Then you'd shoot it. Then you'd break it up and load it in a car. When you hit the car next, had to build a track to move a car up for 25 cents a ton. So he quit there and went to the Hazel Atlas and got a job working there 6 hours a day. 25 cents an hour, 6 days a week. So with them wages, you can buy medicine and shoes and stuff, but stuff to eat, we raised it all. He bought a little cow, we had a couple of pigs, we had some chickens, we ate good. A depression didn't bother us a bit. We worked for what we got. Well, I tell you, I could have stayed out of the war. I was working for a company that was working on jobs that were for the war-related jobs, building tanks, airplanes, things like that. And my boss wanted me to get deferred, but I didn't want to defer because my buddies was all going to the service, and I wanted to go too. I think back then, people were more patriotic than most of them are now. I don't know. I thought that all the kids out there in Admore, we all went. Well, we started in France, and we've come up through several campaigns in France, like the Maginot Line, Siegfried Line, and up that way. And then we were supposed to go on R&R, and the Battle of the Bulge broke out, and they took everybody up there. And they put us in line with some other divisions, because the Germans was making one last push. They were trying to split our army in two, clear down to the ocean, and then that way we wouldn't be able to get supplies and stuff. So that's why we lined up there to wait on them. So then, before they started coming, they took my squad and put us up on top of this mountain, about 4 or 5 miles up. Well, you're not familiar around here, but you're like up on Cheat Mountain, you know, if you're down that crooked road there. Well, it's like something like that. And we had a phone. It was called an artillery fire. You could see from one mountain to the other, you could see the glass shining, you know, like a tank or a truck or something, and call artillery on them. And so that lasted all day, but they kept coming. And then towards that evening, when they was getting around closer, we could see them, I told our commanding officers that we better let us try to make a run for it because they're right around us. And he says, try to hold off. We'll move a regiment up to you. I don't know. I think the guy didn't know what the hell he's talking about because I think the Germans pushed them back. They never made it up there. Because we could have made it faster downhill, and they could have come up a Cheat Mountain as steep as that was. Well, anyway, we ran out of ammunition, and some of our buddies was killed. I had a wound in my leg, and they come in there and just pointing their guns at our belly, and they lined us up. They were going to do away with us, firing squad. And somebody got the idea that we was new up there, come out there talking in German, and they put their guns down and took us away and searched us, interrogated us. They were trying to find out who we were, because we was a new outfit up there. Some of them other outfits were fighting in that area, but we had just come from down in France, and that's what saved our lives. And then on the way back to the prison camp, we come through. They marched us back. We come through some of these little towns where our bombers had bombed them, and a lot of them civilians got killed, and they was buried in their basements. And we'd have to dig down through that debris and pick up bones and parts of body. If you put a piece of meat or something under a rock or something, it'll cook, but it won't burn. So you pick up like an egg or something, part of it was burnt off, and the other part was there cooked and stink like hell. And so then we wound up to Stalag 12A. And then there we stood around picking lice off each other. We didn't have nothing to eat but some kind of soup. And I was on a burial detail. We were burying our guys every 2 or 3 weeks, every 2 or 3 days, and take them out and put them in a shallow grave. You get one of them pictures on you, have you, Jimmy? Show you what they look like. They're just skin and bones when we bury them. There are 2 guys could pick them up. We'd wrap them up in sisal paper. You take the head and I'd take the feet. We'd walk over the grave. There ought to be a shallow grave like that, and drop them down in there. And I'd put dog tag in their teeth so that if they ever got dug up, we'd know who they were. Well, you're real anticipation. You're waiting on them. You know you're going to get into it. See, we had been in combat up through France, several places. I mean, that wasn't the first one, but we knew there was going to be a big battle. I didn't go over in the invasion. I come over, I think it was about maybe September. I joined the 26th Infantry Division. They call it their YD. You can see that little YD up there on the left-hand side. That was a patch on my shoulder. Called the Yankee Division, 26th Yankee Division. It was an infantry. I was in George Company, 104th Regiment, which was a rifleman company. That's what they had, that Garand. I carried a Garand rifle. Yeah, it's something you never forget. And I'll tell you what, you smelt a lot of bad stink, but boy, a burnt human being in a basement was no air. By God, you never forget that smell either. Yeah, well, our troops were getting ready to cross the Rhine. And we was in the first camp after cross the Rhine that was waiting to be liberated. So when they were going to cross the Rhine, they loaded us up on the boxcars, and here our own airplanes come up and strafed us. So then they let us out, and they started walking us. The ones that were wounded, they left them laying there. And by that time, I probably weighed about 100 pounds myself. And some of the guys couldn't make it. They'd fall out right away. And if you fell out, couldn't march, you fell down, the guy just shoots you, and we walk around and keep going. So some boy was walking alongside. I mean, I never knew him before, but we started talking. And I told him, I said, I'd rather get shot in the back running away than to laying down and get shot in the head. So after a while, I said, he says, I think I feel the same way. He says, if you go, you take me with you. So I said, well, we was marching. You ever been out in the pine woods, how dark it gets in the pine woods? And this looked like a country road going through them woods. So I was watching to see where the guards were. They was probably maybe 20, 25 feet apart. Well, when it's pitch dark like that in them woods, you can't see a guy from here to that window. So I held his hand, and we got to one of them places, and we just go jumping, lay in a ditch, because we knew they had a flanker guard. A flanker guard's a guy about 100 yards up there, 100 feet, come along, if you make a run for it, he come catching through the woods and shoot you out there. So we just went about from here to the carport and laid down and let them all go on by. And then the next morning we crawled back down into them woods, and we stayed there, and we found out in that field was a big pile of something. Well, they bury a lot of stuff like they used to here years ago, before they got freezers. And when we went and dug out, there was some of them big rudabakers that feed the cows. We ate some of them. About 3 days later, we heard all the shooting and everything. Our troops had the Germans on the run, and our tanks and stuff was coming. And when they come by, then some jeeps was coming, and I was afraid of getting shot. I took off my T-shirt and was waving it so that they wouldn't think I was a German coming to shoot them. And a jeep stopped, and I saluted him, told him who it was. Hell, I had a beard about that long. And he gave us a case of sea rations and told us to stay there, that we would get picked up on the way back that evening. So on the way back that evening, he had told his truck driver to stop, pick us up, and took us back. And then they flew us back to Camp Lucky Strike, and they had to kill the lice off of us. Well, we was in that prison camp. That's all we did, standing around picking lice. It looked like you killed one and two more came on. And they killed us. Then they sent me home for a 90-day furlough. Then they sent me back to Florida to get re-examined to see if I was fit for combat, to send me to Japan yet. And I wasn't fit for combat, so they sent me to Camp Maxie, Texas, to the hospital. And I was there when the war was over in Japan, and then I got discharged after that and come home. Yeah, well, yeah. Well, see, I had, that was the coldest winter that they ever had in Europe.
Wow.
And you know how cold it was the last few days. Can you picture yourself soaking wet, hungry, your shoes is wet, and sitting up against a tree stump all night, or jumping into a foxhole half full of ice water? That's what we did. The only thing that saved me from having to have my feet cut off. We had as many casualties from frozen feet as we did gunshot wounds. So every time when we stopped, I always carried a couple of pair of socks inside my shirt to dry them out next to my body. I'd take off my shoes and put them on. Of course, my shoes was wet, but them dry socks helped. I didn't have no feeling in my toes for about 6 months. I was lucky I didn't have to have my feet cut off, but I kept rubbing them. And at night, I'd take off my shoes. I didn't care if a German was coming on. I'd take off my shoes. And in that foxhole, with wet shoes didn't do you no good anyway. So I'd take off my shoes and rub them and leave them that way. And that's what saved my feet. We was better off than what we were, and we knew our troops was going to be coming. And I don't know how long we could have lived on them rudabakers, but we was hiding out in the woods, and it was lucky in 3 days our troops come chasing them Germans, and that was it. But, well, when you're like that, you're hyper all the time. You're always waiting on that bullet to hit you. When you're in the infantry and you're advancing, you don't know how many guys are hiding behind a tree, or some of them snipers up in a tree, and the artillery knows where you're at, and they're sending shells down on you. And you know how the guy's hiding behind a tree or on a stump, and you're walking, he sees you, you don't see him, he gets the first shot. Yes, thank God. I don't know how I did it.
Wow.
I don't know how I did it. I worked hard all my life. I had a dangerous job. I was an iron worker, putting up buildings and sheeting on top of buildings. I worked as high as 800 and some feet, and raised a nice family. We had 7 children, and proud as hell of all of them. None of my kids ever got into any trouble. They all got to the top of the line in the type of work they decided to go into. They all made it to the top, and I'm grateful for the life I've had. Well, I don't know. I tell you, I never was one for drinking or smoking or anything like that. I worked hard all my life. My dad worked hard. My dad lived to be 93, my mom 97, and they never had nothing but hard work. So, and that's why I love to work now. I got pepper seeds started now to ready to put in the garden. We're going to raise peppers and tomatoes and cucumbers and beans, put a little backyard garden in. You got to keep busy.
Wow.
That's what I figure. You keep them busy. The best thing you can do. Time flies by and you don't know it.
It was a true honor to have sat down and talked with Mr. Portaro, and it meant a lot to me that he opened up and shared his story to us. But believe it or not, there are even more great stories from this amazing man. The Library of Congress has a 50-minute interview with Mr. Portaro, which I highly recommend. The link to that sit-down is on your screen. Just type in his name when you get there. I hope you enjoyed this special report. I know I did. With 5 News in Bridgeport, I'm Ian Roth.